And joining us on the show, great to welcome, man who's written a very interesting book along with one of the legends in football. We're going to talk a little Minnesota Vikings football and about the great head coach, Bud Grant. Book just out called I Did It My Way, A Remarkable Journey to the Hall of Fame. We're joined by Jim Bruton today from up in Minnesota. And Jim, good to talk to you. How are you tonight?
Well, it's great to talk to you. I certainly like to talk to somebody from a great area like Sarasota. That's wonderful.
Originally from New York, but I like being down here, but I grew up in New York, and in my first football memories going back to the early 70s, and the Minnesota Vikings were definitely a part of that, watching those great teams of actually going back to Joe Kapp with the Super Bowl IV. I remember that was my first Super Bowl I watched, and then, of course, the years with Fran Tarkenton. So you brought back a lot of great memories in this book.
I actually did Fran's autobiography a few years ago, and we did a book signing out in New York, and I wondered, how many people would show up after, he'd been gone about 40 years, and they were lined up a block outside the bookstore, so they sure remembered him.
A lot of people in New York, still think of Fran as a giant quarterback, even though he played more with the Vikings, but had some good years in New York, but really made his bones up in Minnesota the first time he played up there, but more so the second, of course, with the Super Bowl appearances.
That's right, and one of Fran's favorite people in the entire world is Bud Grant, and Fran actually wrote the introduction to the book, and they just had a great relationship, and still do after all these many years.
Yeah, Bud Grant, one of those great legendary coaches, has that great face. Still does, I'm sure, but just on the sidelines, whenever they went to him, really stoic looking, in charge type of guy, and really not a lot known about him. I mean, I sort of knew over the years that he liked the outdoors, but I didn't know a lot of his background story, and I think this book's going to give the fans some good insight into Bud.
It was one of the reasons that I just felt so really thrilled to do a book like that, because you're absolutely right. I mean, very few people knew anything about Bud at all, and don't. And he really told a lot in this book. He didn't want it to be about just football. He wanted it to be about his passions for the outdoors and his family and raising dogs. He got a lot of great advice about hunting and fishing and raising the labs that he's had through the years and what you should do and not do. And of course, he's got a lot of great football stories about some of the great people he coached, and a lot of things, or some of the things that people don't know about Bud is he was one of the great athletes in the country ever.
Right.
Because he not only played for the Lakers, he played basketball for the Minneapolis Lakers and was on a championship team, was drafted first by the Philadelphia Eagles, was the first person in the National Football League player to play out his contract and jump to the Canadian League, and then became a head coach up there at the age of 29 and took him to 6 Grey Cups, winning 4. So just a great all-around athlete, lettered 9 times at the University of Minnesota in football, basketball, and baseball, and so he has quite a career himself as a player, and certainly as a coach, and in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame as well as the NFL Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
so,
I know his background.
Great guy.
I knew his background a little bit about the Canadian Football League. I did not know that he played pro basketball or that he won the championship. He played with George Mikan, really the first great NBA star.
And Bud is the kind of a guy, if you ever asked him who was your favorite player, he'd never tell you. Who was the best, he'd never tell you. But he would, and he did in the book, talk about the most competitive person that he ever knew was George Mikan, and he played on one of the championship teams with George, and he talks a lot about him in the book and how strong a person he was, but more so than ever about what an iconic figure he was, because he had to laugh about when they went to New York to play the Knicks. On the marquee across the street from the hotel outside the arena, instead of saying New York Knicks versus Minneapolis Lakers, it said New York Knicks versus Mikan.
Right, so I've seen that picture.
That's how great George Mikan was. But it was interesting to hear him talk about him. I really enjoyed that, and he just said Mikan was such a competitive player, and that people, a lot of the teams would just put kind of their thugs on him to just try to beat him up. And he just never buckled. He just got stronger as the game went on. So it was great to hear Bud talk about somebody like that.
Yeah, one of the reasons I believe they widened the key was because of Mikan, wasn't it?
Oh yes, absolutely, and I think the 3-second rule, because in the lane there also was because of Mike, and that, I mean he revolutionized the game really, and a lot of the rules we have today were because he just was unstoppable under the net, and and a great guy too. I never met George Mikan, but a lot of people that I've known did know him, and just said he was a wonderful, wonderful person besides being such a great player.
You talk about Bud Grant really talking in the book, and you get that feeling like Bud is actually talking to you the way you wrote it, Jim. But he's kind of known as a man of few words. Was that a challenge to kind of get him to open up?
You know, I appreciate you saying that because I've done Tarkenton and Bud Grant, and I did Lou Nanne, the hockey player.
Oh yeah.
When you do autobiographies, I think it's really important to make the reader feel like that person's talking directly to you, and so we work real hard at that. And Bud really did open up, and I mean he talked about so many different things, a variety of things, and of course his family too. We had kind of a surprise for him, and he didn't know this was going to be in the book. But I went to every one of his kids. He has 6 kids. And asked them to combine some thoughts together and put in what we call an afterword. And they did a fantastic job, and Bud was quite taken back by some of the things they said about their dad, and especially the way he handled the last few years of their mothers. His wife of 62 years, her last few years, and how Bud took care of her and everything. So it was really a great thrill to do the book, because it's such a, there's few people that you can just give a first name and everybody knows who you're talking to and talking about, and certainly up in Canada, around Winnipeg and around Minnesota without a question, and certainly around the Midwest, all you have to do is say Bud, and they know that you're talking about Bud Grant. And I think that's the true definition of an icon, is when you can say, Mickey Mantle, but around here it's Bud Grant. So.
And again, going back to those great teams of the 70s where, you had that great defensive line. You had Carl Eller and Alan Page, Jim Marshall on that team. I mean, Ron Yeri, of course, Tarkenton you mentioned. I mean, the Purple People Eaters. I mean, he really kind of, revolutionized the game the way he coached it up there.
Yeah, he really did, and he had Jerry Burns, of course, as we were talking about before we went on the air, and Jerry, what a great offensive mind he was.
Yeah.
And Bud, with a lot of the players I've gotten to know through the years, some of the guys that played for him, and what often they'll tell you is that he may not have been, the number one X and O person in the world, but there was no better manager of people. And that was the reputation he had, and the players that played for him loved him. He wasn't a scream and yell kind of a person at all. I mean, he just knew how to manage people and knew how the game should be played. And we have one of the more interesting things that I've ever been a part of in the book. We have a whole chapter on Bud's feelings on how the National Football League could change the game to make it even better. And I think some of his ideas are fascinating. And if we got time, we'll just give you a couple of them. One is
I enjoyed that. Yeah.
Change the extra point.
Yeah.
Don't have. That's when people go let the dog out, go to the bathroom, go get something to eat, because they never miss it. So move it back to the 20-yard line, let him kick a 37-yard extra point, and see how many people leave their TV sets or leave the stadium. And the one I really liked, actually had 5 of them. The one I really liked was at the end of a game. We oftentimes sit there for the last 2 minutes, 3 minutes, because one team is ahead of the other, and they have and the other team that's behind has no timeouts left. So we sit there and watch somebody take a knee for 2 minutes, and the clock runs out, and the game's over. Well, Bud's thinking on it is, you have to if you're on offense and you have the ball on offense, and you are ahead, you have to make a yard or the clock stops.
Yeah, that's a good rule.
Now you've put something into the game where it's not just take a knee and let the clock run out, and you have to make a yard or the clock will stop. And so it keeps the challenges of the game right up to the end. But he's got some ideas on the field goal, on the kickoff, on the fair catch punt that really would make the game much more interesting. And it's interesting because he says, I don't think the coaches would like it, but the fans and the announcers would love it. So it's gotten a lot of attention, some of these ideas. I don't know if the NFL is going to be making any big changes soon, but it's something sure to talk about.
Yeah, I like also, you mentioned the field goal, the kind of the the graded field goals. The shorter the ones would be worth less points, I guess 1 or 2 points, depending where it is, and then as you further go back, make it worth more. That would be a great strategy.
Yeah, I mean, right now, if somebody kicks it 55 yards, it's 1 point. If they kick it 20 yards, it's 1 point. So Bud thinks that it put a lot of strategy in the game, and with certain distances at certain points. And again, he said the coaches would hate this.
No, too too many decisions to be second guessed on.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. So yeah, he's one of the most intelligent and I think deep thinking people I've ever been around. And again, that's just, I think one of the reasons why the players liked him so much. And it was just an amazing person to be around, and I just enjoyed it so much working with him.
I always thought that the Vikings lost a bit of that edge when they went to the indoor stadium. I think, when not allowing the heaters on the sideline, those freezing days in December when the Vikings played outdoors, that really was an advantage for them, and they never were quite the same when they went indoors. This
year will be my 47th year of season tickets, so I know exactly what you're talking about, going way back to the early days at the old Met Stadium, and that was kind of Bud Grant. I mean, that's what he was all about, and it was really funny because 2 years ago, when the Vikings named their 50 greatest players, they had a huge ceremony over at the River Center in Minneapolis at the Convention Center, and then that was the year also that the roof collapsed on the Metrodome.
Right.
So the Vikings had to play their last home game at TCF Bank Stadium, which is the home of the Minnesota Gophers college football team, and it was a cold, miserable, snowy evening for that game, and when they introduced the 50 greatest Vikings of all time, and they introduced Bud, he came out in a short sleeve T-shirt. So it was quite the historic, nostalgic moment for Bud to be doing that. But yeah, it was always fun to see the teams like the Rams and the 49ers and those West Coast teams come to the Metrodome in December and see the Vikings, Bill Brown in short sleeves and running around out there, and no heaters on the sidelines. But you're right, that was Viking football, and I agree. It changed it a lot when they went inside. So I don't even enjoy going to the Metrodome much at all compared to going out to the old Met Stadium.
I guess the only thing that you would say that he didn't get on his resume was winning a Super Bowl. Of course, he made 4, had 11 division titles, and lost some tough games in the Super Bowl. But you can't take that away from him being one of the all-time greats, though, right?
Well, and I've asked him about that, and one of the things he says is that he never looks back, and that he has never looked at a tape of a Super Bowl that the Vikings were in, and also say, as much as it would have been nice, he said it wouldn't have really changed my life any. I still do what I want to do, and they had a great football career, and some of that is just, I think the best Viking team they ever had, they didn't make it to the Super Bowl, which was kind of right in between that run, which was the 75 team, and that was the game of the infamous Staubach to Drew Pearson pass at the end of the game when everybody in America, at least in Minnesota, thought that there should have been a push-off interference call on Pearson, which was never called, and it was practically a riot in the stadium after that. And that I think was maybe the greatest Viking team ever, being knocked out of the playoffs like that.
But was that the catch? He caught it on his hip?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. And I have to tell you a quick story, if you don't mind.
Sure.
When I did the Tarkanian book, I was in Fran's office down in Atlanta, and there was a phone call for him, and it was from Roger Staubach. And he had asked Roger Staubach to do the foreword for his book. The book is Every Day is Game Day, Fran Tarkenton. And so I was just sitting in the office, and he put it on speakerphone, so I could listen to the two of them talking back and forth. And of all things, they started talking about that game. And when you said that where he caught it on his hip, they get to talking about it, just what you said here. And Staubach said, "Oh, you mean that play where I deliberately underthrew Pearson so he'd have to catch it on his hip?" And I thought, boy, oh boy, what a memory those two. But just to listen to those two guys talk about the game was just a fantastic moment.
Yeah.
And Bud, two great quarterbacks.
Bud doing okay? I know he's in his mid-80s now. Still doing okay, health-wise, or?
Bud is 86, yeah, and he still gets around. He does a lot of hunting and fishing.
Great.
He'll be hunting. He'll be out of town hunting all fall, doing everything from ducks to deer to do a lot of fishing. Still, takes a lot of trips up to Canada and has basically been through the years all over the world hunting and fishing. But he's still very, very active. I was up at his lake place while we were doing the book a few times, and was out fishing and four-wheeling, and he's quite an outdoorsman, but his health has been really good. We have our first book signing with the book on Friday this week, and I mean, he'll be there, and I'm sure we'll have a huge crowd because that's not something he does very often.
Yeah, great. Well, the name of the book is called I Did It My Way, A Remarkable Journey to the Hall of Fame, about the great Bud Grant, and Jim Bruton has been our guest. And Jim, great stories in the book. I had a chance to read through it, and like you said, it's a guy not many people know a lot about. I think even if you weren't a Viking fan, you knew who Bud Grant was. You're going to get a lot out of this book, I think.
Absolutely, and I think even the people that certainly people that are my age, up in their 50s and 60s. I'm in my 60s, and even if they didn't follow football, it's just a name synonymous with Minnesota and football and the University of Minnesota, and it's just a great guy. And he still has an office out at Winter Park, the Viking headquarters, and he's in there several days a week, and so he's pretty active. He's still the face of the franchise. There's no doubt about that.
Published by Triumph Books. They do a lot of great sports books, and people can get it anywhere, I guess. Jim, you have a website you want to direct people to?
Well, they can go right to Triumph Books in Chicago, their website. The book will be on there. It's on Amazon. It's on BarnesandNoble.com. You can pick it up in any of the bookstores around. It's been out now for a little over a week.
Great. Jim, pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully we can have you on again sometime. Great job with the book, and we'll do it again. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I sure appreciate it, and I love the area that you're in. Sarasota is just a great part of Florida.
Well, when you're down,
thank you very much for the call.
When you're down, look us up. We'll have you on in person.
Well, thank you. I'd be happy to do that. So you take care, and I really appreciate the call.
Thank you, Jim. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, take care.